What if the version of you've been chasing is actually the one you've been trying to return to all along? The one before the noise, before the burnout, before you started shrinking to fit a life that never really fit you. This isn't about starting over. It's about returning. Returning to your soul, returning to your truth, the version of you that has always been meant to be. Each week, we're going to offer up real stories, hard-earned wisdom, and practical tools from powerful returns to help you reconnect with who you are and why you're here. I'm your host, Bryan White, and this is The Return Project. Today, sitting across from me, we have Tania Davies. She's here to share her story, her wisdoms, and explain to us how it works to break down the consciousness change agent that she has become in her life. She works with women to pull them out of burnout, regulate the nervous system, return calm and clarity, and help people move into a space where they can live the life that they're truly meant to live, to pull out the pieces of them that they're longing to overcome, to change from, and to return to. So Tania, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brian. It's my absolute pleasure.
So Tania, I would love to dive right into the deep end and have you share with our audience where it all began and how did you develop the name The Conscious Change Agent?
The consciousness change agent came after many, many years of working as a clinical hypnotherapist, but I'll take one step back. I've come from the corporate world and I was always the good girl. I went out and I got the university degrees and bought the house and the cars and did all that kind of stuff. But I found very quickly that I ended up going into a pretty dark place of burnout, like a lot of women that I know that end up in my clinic or online with. And we're all kind of telling the same old story. Is there more to life than this? And funnily enough, there is. And I think the work that I've been doing in the space of the conscious mind and the subconscious mind as a clinical hypnotherapist all this time, it got to the point where myself and a few friends were moking around and saying, look, Tania, you work in all areas of consciousness. And it's true. I work with the conscious mind in terms of coaching and the corporate work that I do in consulting. I'm working with the subconscious mind, changing habits and helping people with big emotions and trauma. But I'm also working with their higher self in the superconscious, and I'm also working with the collective conscious, as we all are. And so, the term the consciousness change agent sort of sprung out of all of that work. And now I'm actually working in a space of being able to help others who are the helpers, the healers, the coaches and the practitioners in that space as well, work out how they can become a consciousness change agent in their own space. So that's a little bit of a quick summary of how that all began.
When you found yourself in a space of burnout and you realized that your life was not where you wanted it to be, what were some of your starting points that really kind of led you to your change? And how did that space really make you feel? How did you handle your burnout?
Oh, it wasn't pretty. I'm a Taurus, and so I like everything done fast. I like it done yesterday. And as my parents would always say, I'm like a bull in a china shop when I want something done. And so that wasn't really going to be congruent with transitioning from the corporate world into running my own wellness clinic now. So it needed to be done gracefully. And to do that, look, there were some pretty interesting moments where the universe did sort of slap me across the face. My husband had a horrific accident where he almost died. And so I was looking after him and our two young daughters for 6 months. And during that time, I had some really big epiphanies about where my life needed to go and how stressed I was without even really knowing. That depth of stress was creating huge health issues for me that I just kept packing away. And so my usual technique would have been medicate it, put it away, sort it out somehow. But for this, it was a whole new awakening. And interestingly, my mum taught me hypnotherapy, or at least hypnosis back then when I was born. So she brought me into the world with hypnosis. It got taught to me from a very young age, very casually. And I used it for many things, whether that was academic excellence, whether that was sporting performance, whatever goal I had, I used it. And I just didn't realize that other people didn't. And so I was kind of wondering I had this secret weapon that nobody else really was using or knew about. And I realized that that is actually something that could be used, not just in the corporate space, but well and truly in helping people get out of their stuff, get out of their own way. And people were saying to me, look, Tania, in the corporate space anyway, most people are in your office. They're in tears, not because I've got them into tears, but because they wanted me to help them in therapy in an office in a corporate space. So the transition for me was a bit of a no-brainer. The actual logistical process was not graceful. It took me a number of years to retrain once I'd made the decision, plus also not really let the workplace know I was doing that. And then also set up my practice at the same time as working an insanely hectic job in marketing. And so there was probably about 2.5 year transition period where I almost lost the plot. And that really, look, the universe came along and said, you've got to leap. Like all the signs were saying you have to leap into this and do this full time. So I did. And for me, there's been so many moments where there's been deep reflection that's needed to go on, and I've had to tap into a universal source, call it what you like, to keep myself on mission, on task, especially through COVID times and things like that, where we've all been challenged. I think where I'm at now, I'm in a pretty good space. People know what I'm about, and the consciousness change agent work, as well as my signature programs, move across the world and help people very fundamentally get out of their own way, get rid of their traumas, etc., and just no fluff. Give them what they need without all the bows and whistles, to really help them start to help themselves, but then also help others. And that's, I guess, one of my biggest missions. Hopefully that's answered your question.
You were talking about hypnotherapy in there, and I'd love for you to break down for our audience a little bit more about what hypnotherapy really is. I really think there's a big misconception around hypnotherapy.
Yes.
And there is this, I don't know if I'm going to call it a stigmatism maybe to it, that hypno is a bunch of fluff BS and it doesn't actually work.
Yeah.
I believe that it works, and everybody can have their own beliefs. But I'd love for you to share with our audience kind of what does it really do and how does hypnotherapy really work?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to actually clear this up. Yeah, because there are a lot of people out there that think it's just another modality. You know, in Australia alone, there are so many professional papers, scientific papers written about the art of hypnotherapy that I can't believe people at this point in their lives are still questioning it. All hypnotherapy is, let's break those two words out. There's the hypnosis part and then there's the therapy part. And so you could go to anyone that's just done a weekend course that could probably create a sense of what we call hypnosis or trance. That's great, but that's not hypnotherapy. The therapy is something that does need to be, you need to study in that. You need to understand the complexities of trauma and be trauma informed. And then you must add the two together. And I think what's interesting is the hypnosis part or the trance state. Another way of looking at it is an altered state of consciousness. So if you're wandering around every day and you've got all those thoughts going on in your head, we would call that state of mind being, say, high beta, or even beta for some people. It's like monkey mind. It's like just already. The art of somebody who can take you through the different levels of trance is somebody that can then get you to alpha, which would be light daydreaming states. And then we would move you through to theta, which for me is the deep healing space. It's a deep sense of meditation for some people. It's the space that most hypnosis is done. And then we've got the deeper, which is the delta. Now, for some, that could mean they could go very, very deep off into sleep. That's not where we want to do therapy. We want to come back. We want to stay roughly in the theta space. For some, they even might move to gamma. That's more of a spiritual epiphanies and awakenings that tend to occur in that space, and that's great. But theta is like the golden nugget for us. And every single person that manages to fall asleep and wake up each day, they go through what we call the hypnagogic brainwave state. So every person can do it, or they wouldn't be sleeping. And it's a really great brainwave state. It's that brainwave state where you're so sleepy that you're just kind of dozing off. But if for example, if the alarm went off in the house, you'd still be able to get up and run. So it's that great little weird space. I don't know if you've ever been like maybe in a movie or something and it's been a boring movie and you started falling asleep and doing the head bob, the head nods. It's that strange space that you're in. So it's very deeply relaxing. Not all hypnosis is. So let me just put that out there. But it can be a really beautiful space where you just want to stay. And why is that? Because for 99% of the time when you're doing these altered brainwave states, your body is in a very deep, relaxed state that is completely opposite to what you're normally in all day, which is that fight-flight response mode. More so now than ever, we're in that state. And so when people come to me and they stay in this space, they're like, wow, I want to be there so much. And that's where a good therapist will be able to use that moment to unravel the trauma, to unravel the PTSD, to unravel the phobias, the fears, the big emotions. There's so much you can do when you're in altered brainwave state, which is why you do need someone to hold your hand in that space and guide you, make it safe for you. And I think, like, I've been doing it for years now myself and obviously on other people as well. But after thousands and thousands of hours of doing this, I still summarize the best conversations with people are, I had no idea I could do that. I'm not doing anything to them. I'm taking them to a beautiful sacred place for them to be able to access their own resources and unravel their own stuff. And that, I think, is the most powerful part of hypnosis and hypnotherapy in itself, is that I'm not a doctor giving you a prescription. I'm literally asking you to go and find the problem in a hypnotic state where the conscious mind is quiet, and your subconscious, being a beautiful 95% of your operating system, will go off and it will do that with gentle suggestions without leading. It'll take you to that place where it knows the solution is. Now, for some people, that can be instantaneous change. I had one woman that came to me with 20 years of back pain, and she only had that back pain because of what a doctor said to her once, that this back pain is permanent. And, when she was in a hypnotic state, I said to her, can you tell me something in this world that actually truly is permanent? And I left it. And her brain made the connections it needed to make. And she realized nothing is permanent. And bang, she got up out of that chair, and she's still to this day, no back pain. And we need to think that what's actually happening at a very physical level is you're actually creating new brainwave neural pathways. And so let's just say you've been thinking old thoughts for 20 years. We need to create the new pathway and then shut down the old. And I guess that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but ultimately that's what we're doing. We're firing off new neurology that's going to serve you as opposed to the anxious thinking you may have been doing.
So I'm really curious to know, is that why when you come out of this trance or that calming state, that you don't just go back to those habits or those thoughts? I'm really curious, how does that work, that we can be in this calming state and pull out these traumas and these thoughts in these deeper places, but the moment our brain shifts back to that fight or flight and that high anxious mode, how are we not just shifting back to the old ways?
Yeah, I'm going to liken it to an adventure through a forest, because a lot of people like the visualizations. It's the hypnotherapist in me. So imagine going through a forest and you've got your machete, and it's a very overgrown forest, but there's one pathway that you always walk down all the time. It's a no-brainer. You don't need the machete for that one. And you know where it's going to take you. It's going to take you off to that little cottage out in the middle of nowhere where you sit and it's dark and it's dismal and you're anxious. Now, you can do that every day, or you can take that machete and go, how about we try that overgrown path over there, and we'll just see how it goes. And so on day one, you hack through that pathway and you give it a good go and you go, oh my gosh, there's an amazing sunset. It's glorious. I'm going to stay here because this serves me better. But then the next day it resets and you're back in that forest. Now that pathway hasn't completely overgrown again. It's a little bit overgrown, but you can kind of see through it. The old one's still there. It's well and truly still there. So you then have to kind of make that decision, not consciously. This is still at a subconscious level, and that's being driven by your values, your belief systems, all other things that are going on. But what if you just chose that one again? And you went down there and you kept repeating every day, now I'm going to go down this one. What do you reckon eventually happens to that old pathway? It starts to overgrow, right? And eventually it becomes something that your subconscious mind goes, that's not for me. This is the way. So I don't necessarily tie into the belief that it's got to be 21 days or 21 times, etc. But I do think everybody's subconscious mind is different in regards to the amount of repetition that occurs. Sometimes there's an instant firing of new networks and it sticks immediately. And that is quite common. It certainly happened for me a lot of the times because there's an awakening and a learning that the subconscious mind needed. And once that learning has stuck like glue, we're done. But for some people, there needs to be almost like an awakening and upon an awakening upon an awakening. And with each time they repeat it, that lesson blossoms and grows. And I think that the messaging behind that sinks deeper and deeper into their cellular level, because you need to remember your cells are actually listening to you. So if you're constantly repeating negativity to yourself every day, they're all listening. And they're going to enact like a clever little child whatever you've requested of them. So if you're negative, you're berating your body, or, your body's not doing what you wanted to do like 20 years ago it was, it's listening to that and it's controlling the aging process, memory bank. There's a huge range of things that the subconscious mind controls, physical functions. So we need to be very careful as to what we're programming our subconscious mind with. And I think that's why when some people get out of the chair, if they go back to all their old ways of life and they're surrounded environmentally by the same triggers and they haven't worked through those triggers or removed themselves from the toxic environment, yeah, absolutely. We know people are going to go back to their old ways because the conscious mind is still going to try to override, but it won't succeed. The subconscious mind and the conscious mind, when they fight, it's like 95% fighting 5%. The subconscious mind will always win, and it's based in the land of imagination as opposed to the conscious mind, which is based in free will. Now, in this willpower space, I don't know about you, but there's been times where my brain's gone, get up and go to the gym, go for a walk. And my body's just gone, yeah, I don't think so. And that's a clear example of the two clashing. And there's a reason, but it'll always come down to some degree of safety. And it's not logical, so it doesn't always make sense.
Yeah.
We know that in the long term, right, going to the gym is going to be better for us. But our subconscious mind doesn't get that because it doesn't understand the difference between past, present, and future.
Interesting. I'm really fascinated to know, with the subconscious mind, is there a difference between the subconscious mind of men, women, and different age stages of us?
Yes, there very much is. I'm not going to play on the gender space, but I will go down to the ages. So we say certainly, and again, this is a little bit loose with the timings because there is no part of the brain that you can cut up and go, that's the conscious mind and that's the subconscious mind. Just like with a computer, when you open it up, there's systems at play. So if we think about the fact that a girl is probably about the age of 6, 7. And for boys, it's probably 7 to 9-ish, that something called the critical faculty likes to start coming in. And that's because girls are a little bit more developed. We're a little bit smarter. Sorry, boys. But what happens is before that age, everything's through to what we say in Australia, straight through to the keeper. Okay. And sports analogy is not great, but what's happening there is any comment that's made, the subconscious mind doesn't have a conscious filter to stop it. So it's kind of taking everything literally. And so, your best friend at the age of 5 says to you, I don't like you, you're an idiot. You now take on the belief that I'm an idiot. And all of a sudden, unless you're given evidence to the contrary, or a parent or somebody steps in and counters that and defends that, you now start on this belief system and you will do something with confirmation bias. You will start bringing in all the evidence to prove that belief system correct. And that's where we start to get in a lot of trouble. And so a lot of my clients, when they come in, we are unraveling stuff from a very young age.
That is so true, because we can look at it from being parents and raising kids, that if our kids at a very young age develop this thought process, as you just said, someone says they're dumb, and they come home and they have parents who, I guess, they are not supportive of a proper environment and who are continuing to feed that, making them feel I'm dumb, they're going to latch onto that and almost create that as part of their subconscious personality. Whereas we have to be very aware of, especially at that young age, and I think it's true up to even into adolescence, that how critical an outside perspective can be from them to when they come home, how we are able to alter that or change that or enforce it.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we know, the science tells us the brain is constantly shifting, 14, 21, 35. We're going through all these different brain stage developments as well as, mental development stages, emotional development stages. All of this is happening at once. And then you add in the environmental context, and then you add in other people's values and belief systems, which, would you believe you don't even have your own values? You've learned them from everywhere else. So as an adult, it's time to sit down and do a stock take and go, what are my values? What are my beliefs? Do I actually align with them? Do they really feel congruent? And am I aligned with this? Or am I just taking on society's stuff, the teacher's stuff? I might have had a crush on a teacher and I'm like, I love them and everything they say, but what they say doesn't necessarily align with the 40-year-old version of you. And so we need to really take a mature lens to what it is that we value is the height. And for those that don't know, our values are things that we consider to be the most important to us. And they do change in context in our world as well. So your career would be different to the same values for your intimate relationships, to parenting. They're all different. And I think it's really interesting to see when clients come to me and I manage to pick up on their values conflicts, as we call them. I'll see things such as, they're totally broke. And it's because when I look at their values for life, money's not even in their top 10. Now, money can't be demonized. Money's purely an enabler in this day and age. And so when I see that, I find that fascinating that we have to actually have a conversation around money and what money and the energy of money is in their life. And I'll usually find that there's something behind the scenes going on where usually a parent or a teacher or somebody has said, money doesn't grow on trees, or money's the root of all evil. Something like that will happen. And they'll hold it and they'll build a whole part of their personality around it. And now their bank account also reflects it as well. So it's really important that we're aware of our values, but understanding that our values are going to turn into our thoughts and belief systems. And that, for me, we have to, especially as parents, we have to be incredibly careful of what we decide to pass on to our children, because it could be, a blessing or a curse as to what we're feeding down to our children, and not pretend for a second that we know it all, because quite frankly, I think they're our biggest teachers.
Had you always been so self-aware to your values, your morals, and your beliefs? Especially going through your period of burnout, and how did you really see your relationships from your transformation that you were going through? How did it all change? What changed in your values, your beliefs, and How did it all kind of blossom out?
Yeah. I grew up as a straight A student, overachieving, pushing hard, and I hit my first burnout by year 12, so the end of high school, and it was ugly. So I was very sick. My family was going through some trauma with my father having a heart issue at the time, and it all just accumulated into a big mess. And, I was playing sport 6 times a week. I was on the student body this and just overachieving everywhere. And it just makes me sick looking at it now. But I know that all of that was just there to teach me something. And I didn't quite pay attention the first time around. So the universe decided it was going to teach it to me again. So after I'd had my 2 daughters and I was traveling the world for my job and running events everywhere and marketing the heck out of the place, I got to a point where I found myself in Toronto in a hotel room in the middle of the snow, 4:00 in the morning. And I was just exhausted beyond any exhaustion I've ever felt in my life. And I'd already had 2 kids, so I knew exhaustion. And I remember just sitting in a bathtub, just crying and crying and crying. And I'm not an emotional person. And I'm just, where are all these tears coming from? But my body was just breaking down. And it was going, you just can't keep doing this. So again, not graceful, but it needed to happen because there was major epiphanies and major awakenings in that. But to be really frank, when I lost my grandfather when I was in my 20s, that for me was really the first close-up experience of death. And it was a shock. It was a huge shock in the middle of the night. And I was really close to him. And it really just knocked the wind out of my sails. But at the same time, it sent me on a journey of deep discovery. And it brought my mum and I closer together as well, because we've been now on this spiritual journey together for over 20 years now. And it's opened me up spiritually, which has allowed me to keep pushing myself. I never, ever pretend that I have the answer to anything. And I am a perpetually curious person, to the much annoyance of lots of people around me. But I am always asking questions and pushing myself to seek. So yeah, I'm a perpetual spiritual seeker. But at the same time, one of the biggest things I've had to learn is that I've had to learn how to strategically slow down. I'm a fast speaker. I'm a fast talker. I'm an incredibly fast thinker and doer. But
Guilty as charged right here too.
None of that works for me when I have to make a fundamentally big shift or transition. I have to sit. I have to go within. And that's how I learnt that I'm quite clairvoyant. I see a lot of stuff. I hear things. I didn't know any of this. How do you know what you don't know? I just assumed other people saw everything in glorious pictures and constant films in their head all day long, and that never shut up or stopped. Apparently that's not the case. And I've had to learn the different levels of, all the clairvoyances, all the clairs over the years. And you just keep, as you said, you and I were talking before about the rabbit holes we like to go down. I think there's a new rabbit hole for me every day, and it actually excites me. It's not a burden. And the ladies who work in the clinic here with me as well, they'll contest to the fact that I'm never short of ideas and I'm always having these epiphanies, but I love to just share. And again, sharing with the pretext that none of it is right nor wrong. It's just data. And so I think that for me, it allows all of us around here to have a great time expanding our awareness around all different areas. And I'm very, very open to what people have to say.
Being such a spiritual and open person and somebody who has a mind built like yours, I'd be really curious to know that when you're dealing with people that are pouring out their traumas, their PTSD, their life issues to you, do you ever find yourself taking on any of that, what they call secondhand trauma, or that over empatheticness?
That's a brilliant question, because way early in my career where I wanted to help everyone, that was a massive mistake. I learned pretty quickly how to cut that out, because it's just not fair on my husband or my kids to be bringing that energy home into that environment. So I was always very clear in the beginning, I don't do any of this from home. I always do it from my clinic, because I've set up triggers within my clinic, or what we would call anchors in the NLP world. There's anchors that sort of, as soon as I cross my door to my clinic, it stays. And it's not mine to own. That's something I've had to learn very early on, that I'm purely just a mirror and not a sponge. And so my job is to make sure that I'm highlighting for people what I'm hearing, seeing, feeling, observing, all of it. But it's never, ever mine to take home. And it's never mine to continue to process after the session. There'll be times where, my guides will just go bing and my client will jump into my mind for a moment. But it's purely because it's an acknowledgement of something, or it's a synchronicity, or it's a good laugh about something that we've shared together. But then it goes. It's not something that I will sit at home, and I never, ever, sounds terrible, I never, ever overly pre-prepare for the session. Like, I don't sit and write scripts, none of that. because I'm so client focused that I need to be in trance before they're even in my office, because that's how I'm open to what's going on. And I can really start to read through the body language. The body language tells me so much because I'm such an observer before they've even opened their mouths. I read their energy, the mouths, because they've got to, their mouth. And I think it's interesting from a perspective of the fact that I do talk a lot. I think probably 10 times more than I talk. And so if I'm not careful, if I'm not in trance, I can't hear the guidance from my guides and everything else as well. So I do have to be in an equal state to where the client's at. Now, there's a thing, I don't know if you've heard of it before, because it's called we match and mirror somebody and then we can lead them to where we want. And so, for example, I had a beautiful kid that came into me once and he was so anxious that he couldn't even sit in my chair. And his carer was like, get in the chair. And I'd leave him alone. He's okay. Just let him walk around. And all he did for an hour was like walk around my office. And that's okay. Because at one point I got up and I joined him. And when I could match him, I could slow it down and eventually I could mirror it. Like I could get to the point where he realized subconsciously what was going on and we could slow it down so much that I could take a seat and he could take a seat. That took about probably 15 minutes out of 60 minutes to do that. But we had great chats and he was processing. And as somebody who understands the need to process fast, I was there with him. So not all trance is idyllic and so relaxed that we're like falling asleep. In fact, if you're anxious, you're just in another type of trance. It's just not particularly helpful for you. So hopefully that's answered some of that question.
Absolutely. You touched base on body language, and I would really love to know, how do you integrate and understand what someone is saying with their body compared to what they're saying coming out of their mouth?
Some of them are very easy. They're the classic and you will have to understand that there's cultural influences in this as well. But if somebody is saying to me yes, and their head's just, I'm going to dive a little deeper. There's kind of those kind of things, but also where people are twitching. And there's a classic story about the grandfather of all hypnotherapy, Erickson, who leads the Ericksonian style, he's obviously passed a long time ago. He used to be able to watch the pulse in somebody's foot and work out where they were at in terms of, their level of relaxation by the pulse in their foot. Now, I'm not looking at you that closely, but obviously when I'm in trance, I'm also picking up on your twitching. If somebody's in trance and I'm observing them, I very, very often pick up on all the little nuances. They might say something and their little finger might move. And every time they say something that is really upsetting them, their little finger moves and it twitches. And so I know I'm onto a topic that needs to be investigated further when I'm seeing that. And the body does talk automatically. We call it idiomotor signals. And so there could be some clients that just sway without knowing that they're swaying when they're answering a question. And that for them might be a yes response. And then they might move this way for a no response. I do it. And it's not until you're trained in this space and you watch people's eye movements, all this other stuff, that you start to really understand this doesn't always mean somebody doesn't like you. As somebody like myself who gets very, very cold, this for me is a comfort level because I'm cold. So it's making sure that we're also not reading in too much sometimes. And we do need to look at more than just one instance of a body language to be able to confirm that. But also as a professional speaking coach, and when I'm giving feedback to people about their speaking processes, I am looking for, are they grounded? Are they swaying? Do they favor certain sides? Are they playing with their hair or twitching things? So there's lots going on that can distract people. And sometimes I'll even use it on purpose to distract someone.
A little bit earlier, and it's the other direction that I wanted to dive down in the rabbit trail, is you kind of touched base about being really spiritual. And I'm very fascinated to know how much or how important is some kind of faith, spirituality, or belief in something bigger than us really help opening up our subconscious mind and allowing us to do more things.
Yeah. Look, this has been a long road for me because when I was younger, I even used to be proud of calling myself an atheist until the universe stepped in and went, yeah, I don't think so. So it has been like, I'm 46 now, so it's been a long journey to get here. And I'm pretty woo-woo off the rails now, but I'll only share it appropriately with the people and that's something for us to all learn. We don't share with those that aren't ready, okay? I'm also, in terms of my human design, I'm a projector, so I have to wait to be able to be invited to be sharing things. And When I know that you're open for those conversations, then it's a free-for-all. I even asked you before this conversation, and that's my way of just checking in so that I don't overstep the mark and I don't break the rapport with the person that I'm also speaking with. So for those spiritual people in the universe that like to overshare their spirituality, just take that in mind, that your spirituality is for only one person. It is for you, and not to ram it down anybody else's throat. But to answer your question, one of the things I think that I look at in life is I think that some form of belief system, faith, whatever you want to call it, in something bigger and beyond you, for me, actually comes down to a scientific inquiry. And I married a scientist, so I get to play this game with him all the time. And we go back and forwards asking all these questions of each other. And it's a beautiful tango that we get to do. And one of the things I always, and in fact, I think it was yesterday, I was in the shower saying to myself, so if the Big Bang is in the scientific version, the beginning of where we're at, what was before the Big Bang? And we keep going, well, what was before that? And what was before that? And what was before that? And so you can take yourself down all these rabbit holes. You really, really can. But at some point, there needs to be an understanding that our human brains cannot take in the complexity of this world. And I don't mean just Earth. I mean all of it. And nor should we. Because certainly from the work that I do, when people come to see me, I get all different range of people. I seem to attract channelers to my clinic as well. And certainly from the work of the channelers that I have, their work falls into an interesting space of inquiry where I will have other entities entering my office as well and having these conversations. And these poor clients just come off the street, literally to come see me. But during the process of coming through a hypnotic state, there's almost like a remembering that's been going on with them. Now, they might not have been open to that beforehand, but their subconscious mind was, and zero leading from me. I'm incredibly strict on leading. That is something I will not cross that line. I don't even need to, because my clients go there. And you can call it the imagination, you can call it whatever you like, but there is something at play that is beyond our grasp of understanding at this point. And I don't like it when people talk with such definitive belief systems that these are the rules. And if you step outside of that, it's so anti to who I am that I have to be able to think in terms of inquiry in all areas without any of them being right or wrong. Because
absolutely,
like I say to my clients, I have to always play in the gray space. And so if somebody comes along to me and says, oh, the earth is definitely round or the earth is definitely flat, I'll go, whatever, it just is. In this reality that we're working on right now, whatever matrix you've decided to create for your first self, I'm okay with whatever you believe because that's your thing. And I'm just going to keep inquiring as to where I'm at. So I've seen everything and then some come through my clinic. So to answer the question of, the bigger picture, the bigger question and pondering, there was somebody that said to me once that God stood for the grand organized design. And I really liked that because I don't buy into the belief system that it's a he or, any of this kind of stuff. But I definitely think that there is a complexity at play that is guiding every single mission that we've come down here to play. And I think that for me gives me a very deep sense of comfort. And I think, if at the end of the day, I think most people are probably looking for that comfort.
Get very fascinated. You talked about the complexity of our minds, the complexity of the world that we live in. And yet there are the people, as you were just kind of saying, they get into this belief of this black and white box. Mm-hmm. How often do you see someone come in with this black and white box? And when you are able to take them down into that subconscious level, stepping out of that black and white box shifts almost everything for them. Or how often do you see someone resist so hard stepping out of their black and white box that it almost becomes aggravating?
Yeah, it can destroy their life. I mean, one of the very reasons they're coming to see me is there's a problem. And to be able to break down the walls of their box, it really does start, I think, with how they've been brought up, whether it's okay to even question something. I get a lot of religious people coming to see me and we're quite open to breaking down boxes. I get a lot of business people come to see me and they then fall into this category of, no, there's got to be rules. So we have a lot of fun in that space. I do believe there's no matter that I've dealt with in my office where even the greatest traumas that we've dealt with, which have been horrific, at the end of the day, we can still have a laugh with ourselves because in the big scheme of things, we've got no clue what's going on this planet. We really don't. We're just actors in a really well-orchestrated play. So give yourself a break. No one gave you the manual. You haven't rehearsed the script. You're just doing it day by day. Imagine being an actor, not getting paid, showing up every day in the most horrific conditions sometimes, and not even having the manual. That's what we're dealing with. So the only thing we've got really is to have a bit of a laugh and be a little bit more compassionate with ourselves. And I do think those people that come to me, I don't see it as a challenge, because that for me would then imply that I have some role to play to unpack them. I don't. My job is to create the space to listen, to mirror back what I'm hearing, and then they start to unpack themselves by me mirroring back what's going on. And they really do a great job sometimes, even just listening to them unpack themselves. It is fascinating. The epiphanies they have as they're doing it, the walls shatter completely. And I think the subconscious mind is very good at playing in the grey space. Once it has its first epiphany, it tends to be on a little bit of a roll, as I've noticed over the years. And some people can just wipe out years and years and years of trauma in just one session with me. And that to me is the beauty of this work, is that nothing is too big for us to deal with.
Where that makes me even more curious, because it'd be someone like me who maybe a little bit like you said. For myself, I'm not an emotional person, but I feel like if we started getting into a very deep subconscious space, I would probably start just bawling. Do you see that a lot?
And I would say to you, and what would be the problem with that? It is just energy. All you're doing is shifting the energy. And we don't want the emotions caught up in our physical body. There's a brilliant book out there. If you haven't read it, go and read it, called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. That book will tell you what emotions caught in the body will do, what it will create, the dis-ease that it will create in the physical system. It needs to be shifted. And emotions, by the very nature of the word, should be in motion. So they shouldn't be caught up in our organs and our systems. And so for me, the easiest way to get through those emotions and move them on is because we haven't yet learnt the lesson the emotion is trying to teach you. And so if we continue to pack it down all the time, that's not going to be a great system that we're working in. And I think somebody said to me not that long ago, Tania, you're really not an emotional person. Like, don't you think you should do some work to let out all those emotions? And it was interesting to me because there was an assumption made in that moment that I hadn't done the work. And for someone like myself that's been doing the work for many, many years now, I can assure you that when emotion comes up, I will sit with the emotion like it's a person. I will have a conversation and we will go wherever we need to go. This life beyond, I don't care where it needs to go. Whatever the subconscious mind wants to create, we'll go there. And we'll work out what it is. We'll take those lessons, we'll embed those lessons and let it go. And I can give you a great example of how I thought this was a really strange comment from this person who was highly emotive at the time of accusing me of this. I thought, fascinating, because for example, trigger warning, my grandmother died through suicide. And I can talk about that, and I can talk about all the lessons and all the learnings and everything that's come from it, including the therapy I've worked with so many people through, surviving suicide. I can talk about all that. If I hadn't done the work on that, I'd be a wreck. And like you said before, I'd probably take it all home with me, and I would be triggered by their triggers. So there'd be too much going on there. But I can safely say that I can talk to you about any detail of my grandmother's passing and what happened before it, what happened after it, without any emotional load to it. And that for me is the clear evidence that the work here is done. I only see the positives from it, the outcomes, the chain of connected events that have occurred from that moment and the grander picture at play, as opposed to that individual moment and keeping my grandmother's memory stuck in that moment. That's not okay for me. And yeah, so I do look at that and I take the comments from this other person with a great deal of compassion for where they were at. But if somebody's accusing you of not having done the work or you're not emotive or emotional, just sit with it to go, well, is it because I'm packing it away or is it because I deal with them as they come? Two very, very different points there.
That is an area I would like to take us over to. I'm curious to pick your brain on this. What is your thoughts and opinions on the pharmaceutical side of this compared to what you do? How do pharmaceuticals and antidepressants and antipsychotics and the drugs that medical doctors are pushing for people to deal with all their issues play into, or how do they affect, or how do they work when someone comes to see someone like you?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a really sad situation that we find ourselves in where the pharmacological solution for so many things could be found in the DSM document. So, the medicalized version of here's the problem, here's the pharmacological solution for it. Take the pill, off you go. And don't get me wrong, I've had a lot of medical trauma my whole life, lots of operations, all that kind of stuff. And there is a place for medicines and acute care. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. I wouldn't be alive without that. There is also a place for a deeper level of healing and understanding that goes beyond the acute care. And I don't think certainly Western society has got no concept of what really needs to be done to do that deeper healing before we go and pop a pill. And I see people for things such as weight loss. I see so many different things that come from these trauma moments for people. Now, let's think of these smoking, nail biting, weight gain. All of that is a symptom of the trauma, whatever the trauma is. And it could be an accumulation of trauma as well. So there's all that. Now, how would we go and pop a pill for that when we're not dealing with the root cause? So I do work with people that have, say, had bariatric surgery and things like that, but they've not done the psychological work along with it. And so they've not lost any weight. And I find that fascinating. We've gone and done such an extreme operation, which is necessary for some. But if you do not do the psychological work along with it, the body will override what is being done and it will stretch your stomach and it will go back. And this is multiple cases I've seen over the years. And so for me, we need to deal with whatever the trigger is. And there's so many different names for it. And everybody likes to take, the ancient arts and they like to rebrand them and repackage them and stick their logo on them. But let's face it, when we're dealing with the subconscious mind, we're dealing with the root cause of what's going on because it holds all the memories and all the storage of everything that we need to be dealt with. And so I think, whether you go and see a psychologist who knows how to do hypnotherapy or whether you go and see somebody who's doing kinesiology, I think it's all connected energetically, but you've always got to be looking at the root cause of something. Otherwise, if you just keep slapping pills on the symptoms, you're going to keep looping and the body will repeat and repeat and repeat until you get that message and those lessons and learnings. And I've found even from my work, because I work in, regressive states other times and other places, that we're going to loop to other existences as well. That's extremely common.
All this wisdom and all this knowledge that you've now taken on and the things that you have the opportunity to learn now, if you could go back and talk to your younger self, what's one of the greatest pieces of wisdom that you would share with the younger you?
Two things: trust and slow down. Trust in the fact that, and this is trusting in me, trusting in a higher self, trusting in the bigger mission, but also slow down. And something my poor mother has been trying to say to me since I could probably crawl. Slow down, just slow down. Now, what I understand now at a deeper level for me, that's more tied into my consciousness and learning at a deeper level in that slower state. Doesn't mean I'm not fast everywhere else. Like I'm fast. But when it really, really matters, I must be strategically slow. And I think those two things, I've been a very guarded person a lot of my life. That's a safety thing from bullying and all that kind of stuff. But learning to open and expand myself in the right way at the right time with the right people. And it definitely comes down to a whole bunch of trust. And that is a trusting in that you are enough. You can go and get all the certificates under the sun, and I'm a lifelong learner and I will continue to collect all the certificates under the sun because it brings me such joy. But if I don't trust in the bigger mission behind it, what's the point?
That is so powerful. Is there anything that you have on the go going forward? Any aspiration goals, any greater projects that you have on the go right now?
Yeah, so I'm always creating. I trust that the right things are going to come to me at the right time. And one thing that my clinical supervisor has said to me very recently is, Tania, it's about time that you gathered together the helpers. I'm going to call them that. They say the coaches, the practitioners, the people that put their heart and soul into helping others, but don't necessarily have the right tribe, the right guidance for them without a guru syndrome going on. Because I was on a coaching program once with somebody who didn't call themselves a guru, but definitely projected guruism. And it just wasn't my cup of tea. So what I've created in terms of my coaching program is a place where we can be held together. We'll cover off on a bunch of topics that we probably all know, but we still don't do, and just share and exchange with each other. And I know the right people will be brought into that space at the right time for the right reasons. And I've definitely been guided to move into that space because I find people already come to me for, my background is in marketing. I've got a master's degree in marketing and a degree in business management. So I've got the groundwork in, but I've also got the rest as well. And I've had the lived experience in all of it, and then some, the trauma as well. And I think whilst I don't have all the answers, what I have got to is a place where we can sit together and hold the space to go, how about in this container that we're in, we cover the things we need to cover, but also hold each other. Because I know there's so many practitioners out there that are in a situation where they've got no one to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
they're pushing and they're pushing and they're pushing. The world's not listening to them, and they're not getting out there and helping as many people as they want to because they're just shrinking. And, the world's a pretty crazy place if you're going to go and watch the news every day, which I wouldn't recommend. So I've definitely been drawn. I've got 2 one-on-one programs that I do internationally with people for people that want that deep transformation. But this is not necessarily about taking you and shaking you. This is actually about taking you and holding you. And this is specifically for the people that are working in the helping space themselves. And that can be people who might even be, executive assistants or virtual assistants. They're helping. They're just not necessarily being held themselves.
Love it. So this seems like a great place to bring our conversation full circle. And at the end of every one of my podcasts, I like to pose a really deep, powerful question. The question that I throw out to everybody is, what is your definition of truly living your best life?
Well, that's a small question, Brian. Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, that's just such an open-ended question. But I would say live less busy, live more fully is definitely my motto. And I will do that in every area of my life. And I'm an incredibly busy / productive person. But when I really take on the ethos every day of strategically slowing down and living less busy and living more fully, that for me keeps me in alignment with my mission and what I'm here to do. It also feels really good to know that I'm not just doing busy, because busy is for everybody else and it takes my power away. But living fully is for me. It's for me, it's for the kids, it's for my husband. So yeah, live less busy, live more fully.
Beautifully said. I love it. There is so much in our conversation today that I've had a chance to learn and that has really made me think and get curious about things. So thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an incredible episode. And I know that there's going to be more people out there that now, when they think of hypnotherapy and those different modalities, they're going to maybe think about it a little bit differently.
That would be an absolute win for me.
So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Brian.
That's a wrap on today's episode. A heartfelt thank you to our guests for showing up with honesty, depth, and wisdom. And thank you for listening in. I hope something in this conversation stirred something in you, a memory, a reminder, or maybe even a return to a part of yourself that's been waiting. If you enjoyed this episode, can I ask a quick 30-second favor? Share it with someone you know, someone who might need to hear this message too. And don't forget to explore past episodes. There's so much more waiting for you there. Until next time, I'm your host, Bryan White, and this is The Return Project.